Hello everyone, I'm going to show you how to use the Big 7 method to divide larger numbers. But before we begin, I want to review how to multiply by 0. And the first thing I like to do is ignore the zeros completely. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the rest of the numbers. And finally, I'm going to add the zeros at the very end. And for an example, I want to use the number 24. And so what I can do is take 24, multiply by 10. And the first thing we do is ignore that 0. So that 0 does not exist right now. So what I have is 1 times 4, which is 4. 1 times 2 is 2. And the very last step is to add the zeros. And right now I only have 1 0, so it becomes 240. If I have 24 times 100, I ignore the zeros first. Next, I'm going to multiply 1 times 4, 1 times 2, and add my 2 zeros, 2,400. Now, what happens if instead of 1 every time I have a different number there? So for example, what if I have to multiply 24 times 30? I'm going to ignore my 0 and multiply 3 times 4, 12. 3 times 2, 6 plus 1, 7. And I only have to add 1 0. Now what if I have 24 times 400? I ignore both of my zeros. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9. And now all I have to do is add my 2 zeros at the end, 9,600. So now that we've talked about how to multiply by zeros, I want to divide 7,488 by 24. So I want to start small. Just before I start getting comfortable with this, I'm going to start with 10. 24 times 10. Well, any number times 1 is that same number, and I only have 1 0, 240. Well, I'm looking for 7,488. That is way too small. So let me step it up. What if I do 24 times 90 this time? 9 times 4 is 36. 9 times 2 is 18, plus 3, 21. I have 1 0 to add at the end, 2,160. It's much closer, but I think I can get even closer. So let me try 24 times 100. If you notice, I am keeping numbers that have zeros at the end. I'm not dealing with any other number just because it's easy to multiply by 0. Ignore my 2 zeros, times 1, same number, 2 zeros, 2,400. I'm getting close, but not close enough. So instead of multiplying by 200, I'm going to try 300. Ignore the zeros. 3 times 4, 12. 3 times 2, 6 plus 1, 7. And I have 2 zeros to add at the end, 7,200. That's much closer to the number that I want. So remember, I'm going to multiply the divisor, in this case is 24, by whatever number I decide to multiply here. So I've decided to multiply by 300, which gives me 7,200. I subtract, and I get 288. Well, I've already multiplied 24 times 10, and I know that gives me 240. And 240 is very close to 288. So next, I want to multiply 24 times 10. Gives me 240. And when I subtract that, I get 48. And this one's fairly simple because if I multiply 24 times 2, 2 times 4 is 8, 2 times 2 is 4, I get exactly 48, the number I'm looking for. 24 times 2, 48. Subtract, and I get 0. I don't have a remainder. So when I add these numbers that are highlighted, I get 312. And I need to make sure that when I go up here to the quotient, I write it in the correct place value. So I cannot write the 3 on top of the 7 because that would be 3,000. And I don't want 3,000. So I need to put the 2 on top of this 8, the 1 on top of the 8 for the tenths, and a 3 on top of the 4 for the hundredths. And while it is not important for this video, I want to point out that this is particularly important if I have a decimal inside my dividend here. So if my decimal were to be in front of the 7 here, if you recall, all we do is bring it straight up. But there is a space between my decimal and my 3 on top of the 7. So that is important because right here, I would have to write a 0.